Hello, everybody. It's your hostess, Flamingo Writer, here speaking to you all. And hey, I got some unfinished business. But hey, remember when I talked about Magic Knight Ray Earth back then? If you guys don't know, or at least don't remember, I talked about a series called Magic Knight Ray Earth. It was admittedly part of my Magical Girl podcast month back in May of 2024. And I bring this up because while I admit that this here series is a classic, from what I can tell, Netflix, especially for where I'm from, is going to have this here series released into their own sites around January 15th by the time this video is recorded. And hey, if anything, that's pretty cool. I liked it whenever they show a classic series on their sites to see if anyone can get it better. So why do I bring up Magic Knight Ray Earth all of a sudden? Well, it's because Magical Girl and Mecha seems to be the kind of combination that a lot of people seem to have. But as someone who doesn't have as much experience in Mecha like I said for Magical Girl, I confess that I don't have as much knowledge from the Mecha genre. Yeah, I've seen a couple of them, but that's far from what I can say about Magical Girl, because I experienced that genre far longer than I've realized. But honestly, we're not looking at just a Magical Girl and Mecha series, but one that seems to be a sleeper hit than anything. That series I'm talking about is Granbelm. Released in 2019, Granbelm is one of those series that seems to be one of the more underrated pieces out there of 2019, and it shows because of how little very fanfare a lot of people have with it. But those who have seen it seem to like it. And for whatever reason, a lot of people were actually thirsty for more. However, since I covered Magic Knight Ray Earth, I think it's best to talk about Granbelm and see if I like it better than the last series we covered last week. Or this week, depending on when this video goes up, but still. But anyways, let's pile it into Granbelm and see where this series takes us, and let's see if it's any better than gushing over Magical Girls has. Our main character, Manga Suits Hinata, is nothing more than just your average, ordinary girl who seems to have a lot that's on her cooking mind, but at very least, she's very average at best. However, one day she starts experiencing something strange going into the school when going to get a lunch that she's forgot. However, it's here where she sees two giant robots battling each other while trying to fight as time goes on, fighting right by the school, while still trying to have some rivalry between them. Jesus Christ, it's a good thing that there's no students other students in the school, otherwise they'd be dead by now. But yeah, these giant robots are called Armanox, or sometimes referred as giant robot dolls or magical puppets. In these robots, they really get personalized and embodied by the pilot's personalities, powers, and teacher Granbelm from the Battle Royale. As you can probably guess by now, this is way over Manga whose head. She's met up with this here girl, known as Shingitsu, a mysterious ordinary girl who also happens to be the one that's also a part of the powerful line in the other world. But as you can probably guess by now, she's very mysterious, and we don't get much of her past until later on. But her goal is to strive to erase the magic before it gets any corrupted or any. That is until we start realizing that no matter what happens, one of these girls is really worthy to do whatever they can, which mage is worthy enough to the title Princeps, and by there they decide to do whatever they can in order to at least reach the. So, basic stuff as you can expect from something from a Magical Girl series, but also for a Mecha series. But first, let's address the immediate thing out of the room, shall we? Let's get the immediate thing out of the way first. Now, before anyone asks, I know what you're all asking yourselves. Is this a ripoff of Madoka Magica? After all, there are some similarities to this. There's a pink-haired girl who doesn't have much of a goal in mind except just trying to do whatever she can, like Madoka, as well as her own cutesy personality, although she's just still not aware of what's going on. There's a black-haired girl who has a lot of mysterious in her mind, but she still manages to do whatever she can so she can prevent magic from happening and hope it gets defeated off before it gets too powerful too quickly. And the similarities, aside from that, almost rise from up there. Now, I won't say that this series is exactly like Madoka Magica. Don't get me wrong, I can see where some people kind of get the in something in some cases. But let me just say the parallels besides that, however, are ones to figure out when it comes right down to it. See, the thing is, aside from we do go through other characters as the series goes on, and even with that said, however, I can kind of see why some people would at least assume that it's nothing more than just what you'd expect. But unlike Madoka Magica, and yes, I know some person ruined it for a lot of customers that was going to watch that series, this one is not a horror series. As I alluded to earlier, this is both a Magical Girl and a Mecha series, which is why I brought up the Magic Knight Wraith Earth video earlier, because in case you guys have forgotten, if anything to judge by, this is not really a horror series. Yeah, there are going to be characters that will get killed off, but unlike a certain other at least these characters, we actually do get them fleshed out as time goes on. Plus, unlike those other shows like Madoka Magica, Magical Girl Sites, and as well as Magical Girl Raising Project, this one actually has us develop the characters a little more, and what's more, we have a little more of saying that these here characters go into 13 episodes. Yeah, instead of 12 episodes like the normal, we get some cases, this one has 30. And oh boy, do they put a lot into those characters. But let's talk about them, shall we? So let's start off with our main character, Mangetsu. Mangetsu is with a bit more of desire to help for others. Again, like Madoka. But honestly, aside from that here, however, she's also pretty passionate what she makes for like some kind of lunch or something. Most of it is usually sandwiches or any meals that anyone else has, but like I said earlier, she's really average at cooking. Not the best, but far from being the terrible anything like that. But if anything, she's willing to help out to whatever the case is, even if it does take her a while to do so. Aside from that, I can't really say that her personality is anything but something you've seen all the time. But hey, it's a start though, so at least it's not something like, say, you can develop her character back and forth. But even as time goes on, there is a little bit of a twist to her that I won't spoil for you, but needless to say, it did get to the edge of my seat when watching. There's Shingetsu, who, okay, for the record, I kind of see why some people would see she's basically Homura 2.0. She's very stoic, not much except for the mysteriousness involved her, but internally conflicted with that, and always wants to for the magic and always get rid of it as time goes on. But even with that said, however, one thing that really does get to me about her character is that I don't think she's really meant to be just that in particular all the time. The brilliant thing about her character, I guess you could say, is that she's always willing to help out Shingetsu, but Mangetsu. I'm sorry, it's just these characters have similar names, and it makes sense considering that they both have the term moon meaning into it, though, so at least that's going for it. Yeah, I do apologize if I get mixed up with the names, but really, their names are so similar, you might as well just say they're Moon 1 and Moon 2, almost like Usagi levels. But honestly, what really gets me about her character is that she's also eventually trying to find a purpose to have every connection, everything, and her own journey. And yeah, while she does have the most knowledge about what's going on, again, like Homura, I think it really goes without saying that you can definitely bet that her character does show more emotion than you may realize. She doesn't become as possessive as Homura, but she does have her own way to stand out, so I guess that's... But believe it or not, this series actually has other girls to speak of, because they also have a rival to go with Shingetsu, in this case, Anna. Anna was once a childhood friend of Shigetsu, and as you can probably guess from there, she doesn't really take it too kindly as time goes on. Until later on, while she was pretty friendly, she goes into something so bitter, a vengeful protagonist with a jealous rage and stuff. And honestly, when her personality does get in the way, it usually leads them into battling each other. She usually calls her by her last name, if anything, mostly because, in case you guys don't know, these characters are descendants from their own mecha pilots from 1,000 years ago, which I find pretty cool, because I don't think I've seen anything like that, or if I did, I probably don't remember it, if anything. But one thing I will say about this here series is that it really does show that while Anna could be a bit of a bitchy character in her only way, unlike, say, Serena from Magical Girl Sites, she actually has her reasons for it, and I won't spoil them for you in case you guys want to see this here series for yourself. But needless to say, it really goes without saying that there's something about it that's seems hurtful once you get to episode 6. And once you get to episode 7, you'll probably feel bad once you see what happens. I'm only saying this because, again, I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, but I will say that her character really does feel pretty tragic, by the least of I could say. And it really goes without saying, they really did a number on that. We got also Nene, who happens to be very aloof at times and also stubborn, but deep down inside, despite all of that, she's willing to do whatever she can in order to help out Megutsu and her friends out. Underneath it and all of that, she's really deeply caring in all fairness and everything, even if she has a empty feeling about it. But despite all of that, just really to go with her insecurity and all that stuff, she's willing to do whatever she can with her determined motivation, and you do get to see how well she does in her own fights. It doesn't come until almost near, say, almost the middle of the series, but once you watch it for yourself, you'll see how much she does care and all that stuff. Even if, yeah, she does still have that stubbornness, but come on, like I said before, a lot of people have their stubbornness, so I don't really see that much of a problem with it. However, there's one character that I want to talk about, and that's Suishu right here. Suishu. Suishu. Yeah, I'm really bad at Japanese names if it wasn't obvious. But yeah, this character here, despite looking so kind and caring underneath, she's not all of what she appears to be. Despite that, however, she can be a bit crazy at times. Like, she makes Anna's crazy jealousness look like a tame by comparison, and that's kind of telling something. Underneath it all, despite her own way of looking at things, she does torment. He's you get to a little further as time goes on, but more like, say, a calming way till she snaps. And I don't know if it's just me, but I kind of have a tendency to enjoy characters that kind of snap as time goes on. Like, they start off so calm and gentle, and then boom, they're always snapping after that. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I like to see them break their edge. I don't. But whatever you think of it, I still think there's really worth pointing out that they really knew what they're doing with this here series. But speaking of which, I think it's only fitting to say that we might as well talk about something that some people are probably wondering. How do they do this? Like, what goes into this here series of when they control the Armadox, if anything? Like, don't they need anything to control it or something? Well, yes, there are some things you need to know about this. See, like I said, this here series is not afraid to show that they're not afraid to use these magic-fueled robots, or armadox, or magical dolls, depending on what you're looking for, controlled by magical stones. But honestly, when it comes right down to how they're controlled, they usually use their own personality and such in order to use already. And what's more, their glowing stones are within the machine. As time goes on, they usually use these here things, instead of saying controls and stuff like that, they use these here strings that get attached to them and to control with their bodies and such. So whenever they do fight, they can also pull out any kind of armor into ignition, so they can at least get into that ways. And honestly, when you get right down to it, they really knew what they were doing with this here, because this animation, despite it being made by a different studio, it's actually pretty great. Aside from the bits of CGI where they have CGI, which you can probably see for yourself once you watch this series, I think the animation does pretty well for itself. Sure, it's basically as basic as you can get when it comes to that with these here mecha robots. Nothing more than giant battles and stuff like that, but it's really well animated enough. And hey, at least they don't get corners cut off or anything like that, so at least there's something going for it. Unlike a lot of other stuff anyways, this is not supposed to be any kind of series where they're just saying, we're just doing this for the sake of action and anything else. Most of the time, this here series is more focused on trying to find out self discovery and finding out what your dreams are, even if Gutsu herself doesn't know what dream she's following on. But if anything, one thing that kind of does bother me is when watching Granbelm for myself is how long it took me to watch this series. Now, I started watching this when I was getting sick around the time, so I wanted to see for myself. But admittedly, if anything, I really do have to say, they really did pretty well for itself. It has and has great animation, a nice sizable amount of characters, so it doesn't feel convoluted, and what's more, it does feel like that when it is. But speaking of that, I think I need to address these two in detail. So let's talk about the two characters there's Shingutsu and Mangutsu. Because if I don't, someone's gonna slay me if I don't. See, a lot of the time, people are quick to point out that this here series has a bit of underneath of it all must be a Yuri, which I kind of do get to see that in some places. Again, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with anything with a girl's love or anything. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of all these here tropes of anything, and if anything to judge by when it comes to that. But one thing I will say is that I can see why this could be at times. But unlike certain other series I could mention right now, at least they don't go so far as to push it over and say there's incest or anything like that. No, in this case, they really knew what they were doing, and what's more, they seem to really enjoy themselves as time goes on, and what's more, they really seem to understand where time goes with these here characters. I wouldn't spoil too much about how their relationship goes, but you can definitely tell there are some Yuri thing going on if you're into something like that. I mean, I get some people would say it's not Revolutionary Girl Utena, but it's definitely something that doesn't make you uncomfortable. And again, this could be a metaphor for what it is. You know what I mean. You don't want anything undertoned or anything like that aside from all of that. But really, I know this year's video is kind of short of what it is, but I think it's only fitting if I just talk about what else that I find about this series that I feel kind of pity for. And I say pity it because, well, like I said, this came out in 2019, but let's talk about something I need to discuss. See, in all fairness, I feel like this year's series kind of feels like it was one of the more sleeper hits out there. And I feel like that's kind of a shame because, honestly, you would think that this year's show, despite it being aimed at a male audience, would at least appeal to others out there. I mean, from what I can tell, a lot of people are saying this is basically Gundam and Madoka Magica if they were mixed into a blender. And I can kind of see why that is in some fashion here or not. But honestly, I can't talk about Gundam because if I did that, I'd probably be dead after the sunrise. Seriously, don't ask me to watch Gundam because from what I've heard, that franchise itself up there with Tenshinmune would take me way longer than it should, and I have enough on my schedule as is. But even with that said, however, Granbelm is one of those series that I do strive to watch again if I have the chance, but you know I'm not going to come back anytime soon because I have a lot more magical girls on my podcast. But even and beyond that, I do enjoy Granbelm for what it is, but I also wish there was a little more of it. Again, only 13 episodes when compared to something like Magic Knight Ray Earth's length was 49 episodes in a total of two seasons. I'm not here to say that one's better over the other, like I said before, have anything to judge by. I really want to be entertained. I don't mind what series is better. I just mind to myself watching something if it's anything to judge by. But if anything, I think the only reason why Magic Knight Ray Earth had a more amount of episodes has to do with the fact that both of them have to deal with the fact that they had more content and more filler to deal with. Again, some of that stuff only happened during the anime and changed a few things here and there. I don't know when the remake will be out, so I can't really say, but I will say it does still leave a good taste in my mouth up there. Or so I thought. Not to say I don't like Granbelm or anything, but here's what I mean when I say I'm probably not going to look at any Mecha series unless they're magical girl related, and I might take a look at more of these when I have the chance, but let's talk about why I don't talk about Mecha as much, so pay attention. Aside from the key thing here where they have differences in their own story, well, Mecha of itself is just something I'm just not into talking about because I'm just not the kind of person you're gonna find me talking about it. If it was Magical Girl and Mecha related, which a lot of people say it's a weird combination, to that I say, so? I don't care what's a weird combination as long as it's entertaining and still will get my interest. But I think the only reason why I don't talk about Mecha as much is because while I did watch a handful of them, Code Geass, Magic Knight, Ray Earth, Gurren Lagann, Gunbuster, Evangelion, just to name a few, I think it's only because I just don't have that much to say about it beyond you can watch those for yourself and see where the story gets you from there. For me personally, I don't have a problem with Mecha, it's just that I don't have the qualification for it, and even if I did talk about some of the stuff like say Gundam as I alluded to earlier, I'd probably be dead after the sun rises. Seriously, I don't think I have the time nor do I have the energy to talk about all of the stuff in there. Unless I have something to add onto the table, then yeah, I'll probably put a feast on there just so you guys can see what I devoured up. Other than that, I don't really think there's any much more I can say about the mecha genre beyond it's giant robots, give a good story, and see where it goes from there. And I want you all to know, when I started watching Granbelm for myself, I have to fully admit, while I do like this series better than the last series I've covered, especially because, well, the last one I've covered, since with Magical Girls, I'm just gonna come out and say it. I don't think it's as bad as that series is. I hear some people say that they wanted more Granbelm, and I can see why that is. And honestly, I feel pretty bad that it became a sleeper hit because, like I said, this seems like something up in people's plates, if anything. I mean, think about it. Are you guys into? I say this because if you are into the genre, then you can at least try to give this one a chance, or Magic Knight Rayearth if you want to see a more isekai genre or anything. And I don't know about you guys, but the reason why I say this is because while I do appreciate Granbelm, it didn't give me a lot more to say than I thought it would have. Mostly because unlike a lot of people on the internet where they want to spoil a lot of stuff, I'm not the kind of person who wants to spoil everything for you guys. It's just so you know what you're getting into, though. And when it comes right down to it, I still think Granbelm is one of those cases where, unlike the last series I covered, I actually did manage to watch all of this without feeling uncomfortable. Again, while the characters are not as deep as they are and everything, I don't think anyone would choose otherwise. But if I had to infer why this didn't get as much popularity, and hear me out, I think this is really my theory, so bear with me for what I'm about to say. I think the only reason why so many people seem to not remember or at least watch Granbelm is mostly because this never got an English dub. Yeah, you did get to see something like Crunchyroll or maybe a few advertisements here and there, but let's be honest, this series never got an English dub, at least not yet. But if it did get an English dub, maybe I would have had more to say about it than I've realized, and maybe I would have had more fun with it anyways. But it's kind of sad when you realize that there's not a lot I can say about this beyond you can watch it for yourself if anything judged by. And I hate saying that considering that I really feel like if I was like say another reviewer with more better things that I could say, I would at least give more than just say, oh, you can just watch it for yourself, if anything. I mean, granted, I only talked about the characters, what I think about it, the dynamics between it, and probably go on about what I think about it overall. So, was Granbelm worth the watch? I would say yes, it was worth it. I wouldn't call it the best series out there, but I would call it a better series than, say, Gushing Over Magical Girls gave me. And yes, I do realize that some people are probably still upset that I gave that series a negative review, but like I said, I can only give you guys my personal opinion about what I think about a series. If I'm not giving you guys my honest opinion, well, I'm not being a fair person. But beyond that, I still enjoy Granbelm for what they did, as a nice cast of characters, great animation, great battles to see if you want to go all badassery, and what's more, it's one of those combinations that works if you know where to put it. Up there with any other mecha series out there, I think this one may be one of the ones that you don't want to miss out on. But with that, I think that's about wraps up for Granbelm anyways. So, I hope that this here series didn't seem like I covered too much at a time, but well, let's get this out of the way while I still can. The next series we're going to be covering is, if anything, part of a franchise that you wouldn't expect to be created by the same person who gave us Sally the Witch. But I'm going to be talking about Princess Comet next. Not next week because, well, I want to do a live stream next week if my schedule doesn't goof me up, if anything. But until then, I hope to see you all then, and I thank you all so much for watching. See you all next time, and as always, stay flamingo-tastic. I'll see you all around.